In the sprawling penthouse overlooking the bustling streets of New York City, Damon Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city that never slept. The lights of the skyscrapers flickered like the stars of a man-made galaxy, each one a reminder of his success. He was a tech mogul, the CEO of Caldwell Systems, a multi-billion-dollar empire built on innovation in AI and robotics. There was no challenge he couldn't conquer, no deal he couldn't close, and certainly no dream too big for his grasp. Or so he thought. Behind him in the vast living room stood Aurora Lennox, his wife. She was a brilliant mind, an acclaimed AI scientist whose work had already been celebrated by universities and researchers around the world. Yet despite all her accolades, there was one dream that Damon dismissed time and time again. "I want to build something that changes the world," Aurora had told him one night, her eyes filled with the excitement of someone who believed in the impossible. Not just a company, but a system that uses artificial intelligence to revolutionize healthcare, to save lives, especially in underserved communities. "It's my dream." Damon chuckled, the sound low and mocking as he sat back in his leather chair. "Healthcare?" he asked, as though the very idea were beneath him. "Aurora, come on. We've got billions already. This is just a pipe dream. Focus on something that'll actually make us money." "Do you really think the world needs another medical project?" Aurora's heart sank, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "It's not just about the money, it's about making a real difference." But Damon didn't listen. The mocking tone in his voice, the dismissive gestures, they stung. He had always been the pragmatist, the business genius. She, on the other hand, was the dreamer. And in that moment, Damon made it clear which of them was right in his eyes. 6 months passed. Damon's company flourished even more, and Aurora, slowly, began to realize that her dream, the dream she had shared so openly with him, was never going to be supported by her husband. The straw that broke the camel's back came late one night when Aurora found a message on Damon's phone. He had been toying with her idea, behind her back, and had shared it with Serena Vale, his right-hand woman and secret lover. Serena, with her cold, calculating ambition, had dismissed Aurora's vision as unrealistic and told Damon it was best to cut ties with his wife and move forward with someone who understood business. Aurora stood in their penthouse bedroom, staring at the message that confirmed her worst fears. Her idea, her passion, had been sold out for business convenience. Damon had been planning to phase her out for months. She was nothing more than a distraction to his empire, and the final betrayal came when he had told her in no uncertain terms that her lack of business sense was the reason their marriage wasn't working. "I'm sorry, Aurora, but you're not cut out for this world," Damon had said, his voice cold. "You're a brilliant scientist, but when it comes to making real decisions, you just don't have the stomach for it. This is goodbye." Aurora left that night. No luggage, no words, just a painful silence. She felt the weight of her failure crashing down on her as she stood in the rain, her heart heavy with the loss of both her marriage and her dream. But little did Damon know, Aurora had not given up. She had only just begun. 5 years later, Aurora stood on the rooftop of a sleek, modern building in Zurich, Switzerland. The wind whispered through her caramel-colored hair as she looked down at the city below. The past 5 years had been the hardest of her life, but they had also been the most rewarding. She had done what Damon had laughed off as impossible. Aurora had founded her own company, Spectral Core, focused on creating life-saving AI systems for the healthcare industry. And it wasn't just a small operation. Aurora had built Spectral Core into an international powerhouse with partnerships across the globe. Her technology had saved millions of lives, providing affordable healthcare solutions in places where none existed before. But now it was time to return, time to show Damon everything he had lost. She wasn't alone. In her arms, her son, Jace, now a 5-year-old prodigy, played with his toy robot, quietly humming as he programmed it with astonishing skill. Jace had inherited his mother's brilliance, and it was clear that he would grow up to be as extraordinary as his mother had been. Damon had no idea he even had a son, let alone a son who would outshine him in ways he could never imagine. It was time for Aurora to reclaim what was rightfully hers, to show Damon just how wrong he had been. She wasn't just coming back to confront her past. She was coming back to build an empire that would surpass his. But how? How would she make Damon see the truth? How would she expose the lies he had built his empire on? Aurora smiled softly, her gaze shifting toward Jace. "We'll do it together," she whispered. Aurora made her move the next day, arranging a business dinner with the board of Caldwell Systems. Damon was there, of course, sitting at the head of the table, his confidence oozing from every pore. He didn't recognize Aurora at first, but when she walked into the room, everything changed. The room fell silent as the CEO of Spectral Core made her entrance, poised and confident. And when she introduced herself, Damon's face turned white. "Aurora?" he stammered, almost disbelieving. Aurora smiled. "Yes, Damon. I'm back, and I'm here to show you just how far I've come." The tension in the air was palpable as Aurora sat across from Damon at the dinner table, her eyes fixed on him. For the first time in years, she could finally see the man she had once loved. But the man before her now was a stranger, arrogant, dismissive, and completely unaware of the storm brewing in front of him. "You've really outdone yourself, Aurora," Damon said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you're still dreaming big, but let's be real, you can't possibly think you can compete with me, can you?" Aurora clenched her fists under the table, fighting the urge to lash out. She had come prepared for this moment, and it was time to show Damon the truth he had never wanted to see, the truth that his empire was built on lies, manipulation, and his refusal to believe in her. "I'm not here to compete with you, Damon," Aurora replied, her voice steady. "I'm here to make a point. To show you that you've built your empire on the wrong foundation. It's built on greed, deceit, and your desire to control everything. But that ends today." Damon scoffed. "You always were the idealist. You still don't get it, do you? This is business. It's about survival. It's about winning. And I don't have time for your dreams." Aurora took a deep breath, feeling her pulse quicken as she prepared to unleash her plan. She pulled out a folder from her bag and slid it across the table toward Damon. "This," she began, "is the future. And it's the future you'll never be able to touch." Spectral Core has already surpassed Caldwell Systems in several key areas, including market share, patents, and most importantly, the real impact we're making on healthcare. Damon's smirk faltered for the first time. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the numbers. He hadn't expected this. Aurora had been working in the shadows, quietly building an empire that now posed a direct threat to everything he had worked for. "You're bluffing," Damon said, trying to regain his composure. "No one cares about your little healthcare venture. It's nothing compared to what I've built." Aurora leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "You're wrong, Damon. It's not a bluff. And I'm not here to talk about what I've built. I'm here to talk about what you've destroyed. I'm here to talk about how your empire, your precious Caldwell Systems, is about to crumble under the weight of your own lies." As the conversation escalated, Damon's confident facade began to crack. He had always believed that he controlled everything, that he was untouchable. But what Aurora was showing him was a different reality. One where his empire was no longer the most powerful in the world. One where he was no longer in charge. Aurora stood up, walking over to a large screen on the wall of the conference room. She activated the projector, and a series of financial records appeared, showing the vast discrepancies in Caldwell Systems accounting. The falsified data, the manipulated reports, it was all there. "This is what you've been hiding, Damon," Aurora said, her voice unwavering. "This is the truth. You've been embezzling funds, covering up dangerous side effects in your products, and deceiving your investors. Your empire isn't just built on lies, it's built on a foundation of corruption." Damon's face turned pale as he stared at the screen. His mind raced, trying to process the information. For years, he had been untouchable. Now, his entire empire was unraveling before his eyes. I didn't do this," Damon stammered, trying to hold on to his composure. This is some kind of manipulation. Someone's trying to frame me." Aurora shook her head. "No, Damon. This is you. You've done this, and now it's time to face the consequences. But before you do, there's one more thing you need to know." As Damon sat in stunned silence, Aurora's next words hit him like a freight train. She paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in before she spoke. "You've never met your son, Damon," Aurora said softly, "but now it's time for you to meet him." Jace, our son, the boy you never knew existed. Damon's eyes widened in disbelief. What are you talking about? I have no son. Aurora smiled, a small, knowing smile that held a hint of triumph. You do, and you're about to see just how much of him is. Exactly like you. She motioned to Jace, who had been standing in the corner of the room, watching the exchange between his mother and Damon. Aurora called him over, and the young boy walked with quiet confidence toward the table. Damon's gaze shifted to the boy, and something stirred within him. The resemblance was undeniable. The same piercing blue eyes, the same sharp jawline, the same calculating expression that Damon had seen in the mirror countless times. This is impossible, Damon whispered, his voice barely audible. Jace stood beside Aurora, his small hand resting in his mother's. Hi, Dad, he said simply, his tone calm but firm. Aurora's eyes softened as she looked at her son. Jace, this is your father, Damon Caldwell. Damon stared at the boy, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe it. His son, the child he never knew existed, now standing in front of him. The child who in just a few short years had already accomplished more than Damon ever thought possible. You're my son? Damon's voice cracked. Jace nodded, his gaze unwavering. Yes, and I'm going to do great things. Just like you. Aurora's heart swelled with pride as she watched her son. He was everything she had dreamed of, and more. Damon had underestimated her, laughed at her dreams, but now the truth was clear. She had built an empire, not just for herself, but for her son. And Jace, with his brilliance and determination, was going to be the key to taking down Damon's empire once and for all. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more shocking twists. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next part of this incredible journey. The truth is just beginning to unfold. Stay tuned for what happens next. The tension in the room was unbearable. Damon stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. Jace, the boy he had never known existed, stood before him with the same unflinching demeanor he had once possessed. Damon's emotions were a whirlwind, anger, regret, and confusion all colliding within him. How could he have been so blind? How could he have thrown everything away, including his own son? Jace's calm gaze never wavered. You look surprised, he said softly, his voice mature beyond his years. But I'm not. I knew who you were even before I understood what a father was supposed to be. I knew what you were capable of, and now it's time for you to see what you've missed. Aurora stepped forward, her eyes locked on Damon with a determination that shook him. You threw us away, Damon. You rejected us without even giving us a chance. But look at us now. Look at Jace. Look at everything he's already achieved. Damon opened his mouth to speak but faltered. How did you get him to become so brilliant? Aurora's lips curled into a smile, but it was not one of happiness. It was a smile that spoke of years of hard work, perseverance, and sacrifice. I didn't have to get him to be brilliant, Damon. It's in his blood, just like you. Jace turned to face his mother, his voice filled with admiration. Mom's been my mentor, Damon. She's the reason I've been able to accomplish everything. She raised me on her own, built an empire from the ground up, and made sure I had the tools to be better than anyone who doubted us. Damon couldn't believe his ears. This is all you're doing? All of this? You've built a rival company with my son? Aurora's eyes never left him. Yes, Damon. And now, we're about to take everything you've worked for. Your empire is crumbling, and it's because of your own arrogance. Aurora's words hit Damon like a slap to the face. His empire, the one he had spent years building with blood, sweat, and manipulation, was now in the hands of a young boy, a boy he never knew existed. The truth that he had so desperately tried to deny was staring him in the face. His empire wasn't just crumbling, it was being torn apart by the very people he had discarded. But there was one more card to play. Aurora wasn't done yet. She had something else, something that would change everything. She stood up, walking toward her desk where a laptop sat waiting. With a few clicks, she opened a file and turned the screen toward Damon. This, she said, her voice cold, is the proof of your betrayal. Damon leaned forward, his heart racing as he saw the documents on the screen. Financial reports, emails, contracts, everything. Everything he had done to manipulate his own company, to funnel money into his personal accounts, to hide the true costs of his pharmaceuticals. He had been caught. "This is the end, Damon," Aurora said, her voice steady but filled with undeniable power. "And this is the truth you'll have to face. You've been lying to everyone, including yourself. You can't hide behind your money anymore." Damon's face drained of color as the implications of Aurora's words set in. His empire wasn't just under threat, it was finished. All the years of control, the power, the money, it had all been built on lies, and now the walls were closing in. Damon sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the weight of the truth. He had built his empire from nothing, but now everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. The reality of his situation began to sink in, and for the first time, Damon felt a surge of fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of losing control. Aurora's words echoed in his mind, but now they held a deeper meaning. She had warned him. She had tried to show him that greed, manipulation, and control would eventually lead to his downfall. And now, it was happening. "We've worked tirelessly to build Spectral Core into what it is today," Aurora continued, her voice calm but fierce. "And we won't stop until we've taken everything you've worked for. You thought you could play with people's lives, but now it's your turn to face the consequences." Damon swallowed hard, his eyes never leaving the screen. "What do you want from me, Aurora?" His voice was shaky, the weight of defeat settling over him. "What are you going to do now?" Aurora's expression softened, but there was no warmth in her gaze. "I'm not here to destroy you, Damon. You've already done that to yourself. I'm here to show you that there's a way out. There's always a way to make things right. But only if you admit the truth, only if you take responsibility for the destruction you've caused." Damon's mind raced. Could he do it? Could he admit to the lies, the greed, and the manipulation? Would he lose everything? He looked up at Jace, who was watching him with an intensity that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. Jace wasn't just Aurora's son, he was Damon's son. And for the first time, Damon saw the boy for who he truly was. Not just a rival, not just a symbol of his failure, but a child who deserved better than the world Damon had created. Damon stood in silence, struggling to comprehend everything he had just seen. The evidence Aurora had presented was irrefutable. He had been caught in his own lies, and now the weight of his actions was pressing down on him harder than ever before. His empire was crumbling, his reputation shattered, and the one thing that had once kept him going, the pursuit of power, now seemed utterly meaningless. Aurora's voice broke through the fog of his thoughts. "This is just the beginning, Damon. You can try to fight it, but the truth is already out. The people who were loyal to you, your employees, your partners, are all starting to see who you really are. Your foundation is built on lies. It's all coming down now, piece by piece." Jace stood beside her, his gaze unwavering, his maturity belying his age. "I've known for years that this day would come," Jace said, his voice calm yet full of quiet intensity. "I spent years watching you, Damon, and I saw the way you treated my mother, the way you treated people. This isn't personal, it's about doing what's right." Damon's mind reeled, and for the first time, he felt a deep, gut-wrenching regret. He had allowed himself to become consumed by ambition, blind to the lives he was destroying. He had pushed aside the very people who cared about him, Aurora, Jace, even his own family, in his pursuit of more wealth, more power. But now, the cost of that ambition was becoming clear. His empire was on the brink of collapse, and there was nothing left for him to cling to. The walls were closing in, and Damon knew that the only way out was to face the consequences of his actions. As the weight of the situation sank in, Damon knew he had a choice to make. He could continue to fight, to deny the truth, and hope that his empire might survive this. Or, he could finally face the truth and accept the consequences. Aurora's eyes never wavered as she watched him. "You can try to rebuild, Damon," she said, "but there's no going back. You'll always be known for what you've done. The question is, what kind of man do you want to be from here on out?" Jace's eyes softened slightly as he looked at his father. "I didn't want this for you, Damon. I didn't want to see you fall. But you've given me no choice. You left me with nothing to believe in but the truth. And now, you have to face it." Damon felt a knot form in his stomach as the full realization hit him. This wasn't just about losing a company or a fortune. It was about losing the respect of his son, the respect of his peers, and, perhaps most painfully, his own self-respect. He took a deep breath, then looked at Aurora, his voice hoarse but filled with a new sense of determination. "I want to make things right. For you, for Jace. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." Aurora regarded him coolly, her expression guarded but not entirely dismissive. "Words are easy, Damon, but actions are what matter. You've spent years deceiving everyone around you. Now, it's time to prove that you can change. If you really want to make things right, it starts with owning up to what you've done." Damon spent the next few days in isolation, alone in his mansion with only the constant reminder of his past mistakes to keep him company. He reviewed the evidence Aurora had shown him, the financial documents, the hidden accounts, the emails, each piece of proof chipping away at the empire he had once thought invincible. But the hardest thing to process was not the loss of money or power. It was the loss of his family, his son, and the woman he had once loved. Aurora had been right. He had built everything on a foundation of lies, and now it was all collapsing around him. One morning, as he sat in his study staring at the empty room, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Aurora. "We need to talk," it read. Damon's heart skipped a beat. He had known that this conversation was coming. But now, with everything on the line, he wasn't sure what to expect. He quickly replied, agreeing to meet her at the same cafe where they had first started their relationship years ago. The place where it all began, before the world had gotten in the way of their happiness. The cafe was quiet when Damon arrived, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Aurora was already there, sitting at a table by the window, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked calm, collected, but Damon could see the underlying tension in her posture. He sat down across from her, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling within him. "Tell me what I need to do." Aurora studied him for a long moment before speaking. "This isn't going to be easy, Damon. You can't just fix everything by throwing money at it. You've destroyed people's lives, people who trusted you. You've hurt Jace, you've hurt me, and you've hurt yourself." Damon nodded, his throat tight. "I know. I can't take back what I've done, but I'm willing to try. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Aurora's expression softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "You've spent so much of your life chasing after more power, more wealth, but you never stopped to consider what really mattered. Now everything you've built is in danger of falling apart. It's not just about saving your company, it's about saving yourself." She paused, then added, "And the first step to saving yourself is admitting the truth. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more secrets." Damon took a deep breath, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm ready." Aurora didn't speak immediately. She took a long sip from her coffee, her eyes locked on Damon's. His desperation, his quiet plea for redemption. It was clear to her now, as it had never been before, that he was not the man he had been when he cast her aside. He had changed, but was it too late for him? Too late for the family he had thrown away? She had spent years building her own life, and the scar he had left on her heart still stung, even as he sat across from her, finally admitting his faults. "I need you to do something, Damon," Aurora said quietly, setting her cup down. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it. "You need to go to Jace. You need to look him in the eyes and tell him the truth." Damon's heart dropped. The thought of facing his son, knowing how much he had hurt him, made his chest tighten. Jace had always been a boy with a kind heart, always forgiving, always trusting. But Damon knew, in the deepest part of his soul, that his actions had shattered that trust. How could he ever expect to rebuild what he had so recklessly torn apart? "I don't even know where to begin," Damon confessed, his voice cracking slightly. "I've spent years lying to him, treating him like he was just another part of my empire. I didn't see him for who he truly was, for who he needed me to be." Aurora leaned in slightly, her gaze unwavering. "The truth, Damon, is the only thing that will set you free. Not just with him, but with yourself. You owe him the truth more than anyone." Damon felt his stomach twist into knots. Could he do this? Could he face the damage he had caused? Don't just tell him. Show him that you're willing to change. You've spent so long running after success that you forgot to live your life. But now, you have a chance to make things right. But that starts with honesty, real honesty. That evening, Damon stood in front of his mansion's tall glass windows, staring out into the night. The city lights glittered below, but inside, there was only a deep sense of emptiness. For the first time in a long while, Damon felt the weight of his own actions fully. He had spent his entire life building walls around himself, walls that kept everyone, his family, his friends, even his own son, at a distance. Now, those walls were crumbling, and Damon was being forced to confront what he had spent years avoiding. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Aurora. "Have you decided to do this yet?" it read. Damon stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the pressure mounting. He knew what he needed to do, but could he bring himself to go through with it? The thought of facing Jace, seeing the hurt in his eyes, the disappointment, filled him with dread. But Aurora's words echoed in his mind. The truth. The only thing that will set you free. With a shaky breath, Damon tapped out a quick reply. "I'm going to talk to him." Jace was sitting in his room when Damon knocked lightly on the door. It was a quiet knock, almost as if Damon was afraid to be heard. For years, Damon had been a father who was distant, disconnected. But tonight, he was trying to change, trying to be the father his son needed, not the one he had been. "Dad?" Jace's voice came through the door, a little hesitant but still hopeful. "Is everything okay?" Damon opened the door slowly, stepping into the room. It was a small, modest space, far removed from the grandeur of his mansion. Jace's room was filled with books, old records, and the little trinkets of a teenager who still believed in the good of the world. "Can we talk?" Damon's voice was quiet, almost unsure. This wasn't the CEO Damon Reed speaking now. This was just a father facing the consequences of his actions. Jace looked up, his face betraying a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Sure, Dad, what's going on?" Damon swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had always prided himself on being a man of action, of power. But now, as he stood in front of his son, he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. "Jace, I know I've failed you," Damon began, his voice shaky. "I failed you as a father. I wasn't there for you. I pushed you away, and for that I'm sorry." Jace blinked, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to apologize, Dad. It's okay." "No, it's not," Damon said, his voice gaining strength. "I didn't show you the love you deserved. I didn't show you the kind of father I should have been. I let ambition, greed, and pride come between us, and I regret it every day. I've ruined everything, Jace. I've ruined you, I've ruined your mother, and I've ruined myself." Jace was silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed his father's words. Finally, he spoke. "Why now, Dad? Why are you telling me all this now?" Damon's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. "Because I can't undo the past, but I can try to make it right. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know the truth. Everything I've done, all the lies, the betrayals, it was all for nothing. I lost the most important thing in my life. You." Jace looked down at his hands, his fingers nervously twisting together. "It's just hard to believe, Dad. For so long, I thought you didn't care about me. I thought maybe you just didn't want me." Damon's heart broke at the sound of those words. "I do care, Jace. More than anything. I've spent years trying to build something that didn't matter. But now I see what really matters. And it's you. You're the most important thing in my life." Jace looked up, his eyes softening as he met his father's gaze. The anger, the bitterness, the years of resentment, it was still there, buried deep inside him. But Damon could see something else too. There was a flicker of hope, a chance for something more. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Dad," Jace said quietly, his voice steady but laced with pain. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try to trust you again." Damon's breath caught in his throat, his eyes welling with tears. It wasn't the full forgiveness he wanted, but it was a start. It was more than he had ever hoped for. "I'll do whatever it takes, Jace," Damon vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll earn your trust again, I promise." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Damon and Jace. Their relationship, fragile and broken just days ago, was beginning to rebuild, but it wasn't easy. Damon had hoped for a clean slate, for a quick forgiveness from his son, but it became apparent that trust would take time. Jace, for all his quiet acceptance of his father's apology, had his reservations. He wasn't ready to throw himself into their relationship with the same blind trust he once had. It was a heavy realization for Damon, how deeply he had scarred his son by abandoning him, and how difficult it would be to heal those wounds. But even though the road ahead seemed impossibly long, Damon had no intention of giving up. Aurora had been his unwavering support through the entire process. She didn't offer him easy solutions or false reassurances. Instead, she encouraged him to keep working, keep showing up, and most importantly, keep being consistent. "You can't expect Jace to just forget everything," she reminded him during one of their late-night talks. "You've got to earn back every little piece of trust, step by step." And so Damon tried. He took Jace out for simple dinners, the kind where the conversation flowed with ease, not forced but natural. They talked about everything, from movies to books to life in general. Damon noticed a change, albeit subtle. Jace was starting to open up. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he was starting to trust that Damon wouldn't abandon him again. The most heartwarming moment came when Jace called Damon to help him fix his old car. It wasn't the most glamorous thing, but it was a moment of bonding that felt real. Damon, with his wealth and power, was used to solving big problems, making deals, and making things happen on a grand scale. But this was personal. It was simple. It was raw. It was father and son in the most human sense. As they worked together in the garage, Damon felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the closure he had been expecting. It wasn't some grand reconciliation. But it was a start. And that was more than he had hoped for just a few days ago. Weeks passed, and Damon's new routine took shape. He spent less time on the empire he had built and more time with Jace and Aurora. The work-life balance he had never considered before was now his priority. He found joy in the little things, family dinners, late-night conversations, and even quiet walks through the park. But the real breakthrough came when Jace handed him a letter one evening. It wasn't an apology, nor was it an act of forgiveness. It was a letter from Jace, written after a long evening of introspection. "Dad," Jace began in his familiar handwriting, "I don't know if I'll ever truly understand why you did what you did. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you for what you put us through. But I know this. I'm not the same person I was when you left. I've learned to stand on my own. I've learned to not need you. But I want to try to build something with you, even if that means starting from nothing." The letter hit Damon like a punch to the gut. It wasn't easy to read. The words were raw, the pain evident in every sentence. But in some strange way, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever received. Jace wasn't offering forgiveness, not yet, but he was offering a possibility, and for Damon, that was everything. Through all of this, Aurora had become more than just a guiding voice. She was a constant presence, someone who saw Damon for who he truly was. Not the billionaire CEO, not the man who had discarded his family, but the man struggling to rebuild, one piece at a time. She often came by to visit, bringing little gifts for Jace, books, his favorite snacks, or small things that showed her deep care for both of them. Damon saw the way Jace interacted with Aurora. There was no fear, no distance. He was the son she never had, and in return, she treated him with a nurturing affection that had been absent from his life for so long. And yet, there was an undercurrent to their relationship. Damon knew that Aurora's support had been more than just kindness. She had been through so much in her own life, and though Damon had tried to help her, he knew she was still carrying her own weight, her own fears, and her own scars. But she never let it show. Not with Damon, not with Jace. She had put her own life on hold to help Damon rebuild his, and in many ways that made him feel even more indebted to her. He couldn't help but wonder, how much of her had she sacrificed for him? There were moments, late at night, when Damon would catch her staring out of the window, her expression distant, as if lost in her own thoughts. He wondered what it was that haunted her. Was it guilt, regret, or was it simply the weight of everything she had been through, and the quiet burden of helping him, her biggest challenge yet? The empire that Damon had spent years building was crumbling. The losses were mounting, but what Damon found even more painful than the financial hit was the realization that he had built this empire on the wrong things. Power, greed, and control had been his only motivations for so long. Now those very things were slipping through his fingers. He could have easily gone to his board, reorganized, and turned things around. But something inside him kept him from doing it. He wanted a fresh start, not just for him, but for Jace as well. So with Aurora by his side, he made a decision. He was going to sell off the parts of his company, piece by piece, until all that remained was the legacy he wanted to leave. A legacy of integrity, family, and love. He wanted Jace to inherit something built on the right principles, not wealth for wealth's sake, but something more lasting. "I'll help you," Aurora said when Damon confided in her about his decision. "But you know it won't be easy. People won't understand." Damon nodded. "I know, but I don't want to be remembered as a man who built an empire on lies." The decision to sell the empire he had built was not a simple one. Damon knew the weight of the choice. He had spent his entire life climbing to the top of the business world, amassing wealth and power. But now, as he stood in front of his office windows overlooking the sprawling city, he realized that none of it meant anything without the people he loved. Jace had slowly started to trust him again, but it wasn't easy. Every moment was a test, a step forward and 2 steps back. Yet, Damon knew that the journey would be worth it. He had to rebuild the relationship with his son from the ground up, and that meant being present, being vulnerable, and most importantly, being real. Aurora, who had been his rock throughout this process, was more than just a partner. She was his confidant, the one person who knew the depth of his struggle. She saw through his tough exterior and understood the vulnerability that lay underneath. He couldn't have come this far without her. As Damon prepared to leave the office one evening, a message from his lawyer arrived. He opened it quickly, his heart racing. The deal was final. The empire was being dismantled, and the assets would be transferred to the new owners. Damon had made the right choice, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. He took a deep breath and sent a text to Jace. "I'm going to do things right from now on. For you, for us." He wasn't sure what his son would say, but it was the first step in showing him that his father could change, that he could rebuild his life and his family. Jace was still hesitant, still not sure if he could fully forgive Damon. But the subtle shifts in their relationship were evident. Damon had stopped focusing on business and started focusing on what truly mattered, Jace and Aurora. Together, they began creating a new dynamic, a family dynamic that was built on trust and love, not wealth and status. Aurora played a big role in this new chapter. She had always been the glue that held them together, and now more than ever, Damon realized just how much she had given up for him. She had been his anchor, her unwavering support, a constant source of strength. But Damon couldn't shake the feeling that Aurora had her own battle to fight, her own scars to heal. One evening, after dinner, Damon sat with her on the porch, watching the sunset. "You've done more for me than anyone else ever could," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve you." Aurora turned to face him, her eyes soft but filled with wisdom. "You're doing better, Damon. That's what matters. You're trying. That's all any of us can do." "But I still feel like I'm not enough for you or for Jace," Damon admitted, his voice shaky. "I've wasted so much time." Aurora smiled gently, touching his hand. "You're enough. You just need to believe that." Weeks passed, and the changes in Damon's life started to take shape. The sale of his empire allowed him to focus on the things that truly mattered. He didn't need millions to prove his worth. He just needed to be the man his son and Aurora deserved. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, Jace invited Damon to his school's parent-teacher conference. Damon was nervous. He hadn't been to anything like this in years. But he knew it was important. It was another chance for him to show up, to prove that he was changing. As they walked into the school, Damon couldn't help but feel out of place. This wasn't a world he was used to. He was used to boardrooms, not classrooms. But as Jace introduced him to his teachers, Damon felt a warmth he hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something real, something that mattered. The conference itself was simple. The teachers praised Jace's academic achievements, but what really struck Damon was the way Jace looked at him. There was no judgment in his eyes, just a quiet understanding. Jace wasn't expecting Damon to be perfect, but he was beginning to see that his father was trying. The next few months were filled with small victories. Damon and Jace spent more time together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension, but Damon was committed. He wanted to be the father Jace had always deserved. Aurora, too, had her own moments of vulnerability. She had been there for Damon through the worst of it, but she was starting to ask herself if she had put her own needs on hold for too long. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, she finally spoke up. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Aurora said softly, her gaze not meeting his. "Maybe it's time for me to start thinking about my own life too. I've helped you, Damon. I've been here for you. But I need to know where I fit into all of this. Where I fit into your future." Damon was taken aback. He had never considered that Aurora might feel lost in all of this. She had been so selfless, so focused on helping him and Jace, that he hadn't realized how much she had sacrificed. "I don't want you to feel like you're just here for me," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been my everything. I don't want to lose you." Aurora looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm not going anywhere, Damon, but I need to know that I'm not just a bystander in your life. I need to know that I matter too." After that evening, Damon couldn't shake the weight of Aurora's words. He had always focused on fixing things with Jace, but in doing so, he had neglected the one person who had always stood by him. He owed Aurora an explanation, a promise that he wasn't just living for the past anymore, but for their future, together. One weekend, Damon took Aurora out to a quiet spot they had visited early in their relationship, a secluded lakeside cabin where they had once talked about their dreams before everything got complicated. The air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of purple and gold as the sun began to set. It was the perfect backdrop for a conversation that Damon knew would change everything. "Aurora," Damon began, his voice serious but soft, "I know I've let you down. I've been so focused on rebuilding with Jace, trying to undo the mistakes I made, that I didn't realize you were sacrificing too. You've always been my anchor, but I've never truly stopped to think about what you need." Aurora met his gaze, her eyes softened by years of knowing him. "Damon, I've never needed you to be perfect. I just need you to be present. We've been through so much. I've always been here, and I will continue to be. But I need to know you're here for me, really here, for us." Damon could feel his heart pounding as he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm here, Aurora, and I will continue to be here, not just as your partner, but as someone who finally gets what it means to have someone to fight for. It's not just Jace anymore, it's you too. You've always been a part of this, and I'm done pretending that everything else matters more than the people I love." Aurora looked at him, her expression a mix of hope and skepticism. "I've been waiting for you to see that, but words aren't enough anymore. You have to show me, Damon." With that, Damon knew this was his turning point. His empire, everything he had built, meant nothing if he couldn't hold on to what truly mattered. And now, for the first time, he was ready to prove it. He was ready to rebuild a future, not just for Jace, but for Aurora too. Weeks turned into months, and Damon's commitment to change was put to the test. He began to prioritize time with his family over business deals, and he became more involved with Jace's life, attending school events, parent-teacher meetings, and even taking Jace to football practice. It wasn't easy, but slowly, Jace started to see his father in a new light. He started to believe that the man who had hurt him in the past was finally making an effort to be the father he had always wanted. For Aurora, Damon's actions spoke louder than anything he had said. She saw him taking responsibility, making decisions for the family, and carving out time for their relationship. For the first time in years, Aurora felt like a priority, not just a part of the background. The small gestures, like bringing her coffee in the morning or planning their weekend getaways, reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with before the business had consumed him. But Damon knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be smooth. Jace still had moments of doubt. He still couldn't forget the years of absence. And as much as Damon tried, there were still moments when he felt the weight of the past crushing him. Would Jace ever truly forgive him? Would Aurora truly believe that he had changed? Or was this just another temporary phase? The turning point came unexpectedly. Damon had decided to take Jace on a trip to the mountains for a weekend away, a chance to bond without the distractions of their daily lives. The night before they were to leave, Damon sat down with Jace in the living room, both of them silent at first. Jace finally broke the silence. "Dad, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what happened, for what you did to Mom and me, but I can see that you're trying. I'm just not sure if I can believe you yet." Damon's heart ached, but he understood. "I know it's hard, Jace. I know I can't just ask you to forgive me in one day, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. I'll never be perfect, but I'll always try my best for you and for your mom." Jace looked at his father for a long moment, his eyes softening slightly. "I'll try too, but you've got to show me every single day." Damon nodded, a silent promise in his heart that he would keep. As the months passed, Damon's efforts became more apparent. He was no longer just the man who had everything, but the man who was actively involved in his family's lives. There were no more late-night calls about business deals or weekends spent in boardrooms. Instead, Damon was there, at Jace's sports games, helping Aurora with her own projects and attending family dinners. But the true test came when Aurora decided to take on a new challenge of her own, a business venture she had been dreaming about for years. Damon, who had always been the businessman, knew that it was his time to support her dreams, just as she had supported his. One evening, as Aurora sat with her laptop, working through her plans for a new startup in the healthcare industry, Damon approached her, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "What's this? A new project?" Aurora looked up, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I want to create something that makes a difference. Not just profit, but real change in people's lives." Weeks turned into months, and Damon's commitment to change was put to the test. He began to prioritize time with his family over business deals, and he became more involved with Jace's life, attending school events, parent-teacher meetings, and even taking Jace to football practice. It wasn't easy, but slowly, Jace started to see his father in a new light. He started to believe that the man who had hurt him in the past was finally making an effort to be the father he had always wanted. For Aurora, Damon's actions spoke louder than anything he had said. She saw him taking responsibility, making decisions for the family, and carving out time for their relationship. For the first time in years, Aurora felt like a priority, not just a part of the background. The small gestures, like bringing her coffee in the morning or planning their weekend getaways, reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with before the business had consumed him. But Damon knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be smooth. Jace still had moments of doubt. He still couldn't forget the years of absence. And as much as Damon tried, there were still moments when he felt the weight of the past crushing him. Would Jace ever truly forgive him? Would Aurora truly believe that he had changed? Or was this just another temporary phase? The turning point came unexpectedly. Damon had decided to take Jace on a trip to the mountains for a weekend away, a chance to bond without the distractions of their daily lives. The night before they were to leave, Damon sat down with Jace in the living room, both of them silent at first. Jace finally broke the silence. "Dad, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what happened, for what you did to Mom and me, but I can see that you're trying. I'm just not sure if I can believe you yet." Damon's heart ached, but he understood. "I know it's hard, Jace. I know I can't just ask you to forgive me in one day, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. I'll never be perfect, but I'll always try my best for you and for your mom." Jace looked at his father for a long moment, his eyes softening slightly. "I'll try too, but you've got to show me every single day." Damon nodded, a silent promise in his heart that he would keep. As the months passed, Damon's efforts became more apparent. He was no longer just the man who had everything, but the man who was actively involved in his family's lives. There were no more late-night calls about business deals or weekends spent in boardrooms. Instead, Damon was there, at Jace's sports games, helping Aurora with her own projects and attending family dinners. But the true test came when Aurora decided to take on a new challenge of her own, a business venture she had been dreaming about for years. Damon, who had always been the businessman, knew that it was his time to support her dreams, just as she had supported his. One evening, as Aurora sat with her laptop, working through her plans for a new startup in the healthcare industry, Damon approached her, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "What's this? A new project?" Aurora looked up, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I want to create something that makes a difference. Not just profit, but real change in people's lives." Damon sat down beside her. "I'm all in. Whatever you need, I'll support you. Let's make it happen." Aurora's eyes widened, not expecting this level of commitment. "You really mean that?" Damon smiled, his tone soft but resolute. "I've realized that everything I've done in the past hasn't been about what's important. It's about what we build together now. I want to be there for you, just like you've been there for me." Aurora's heart swelled with gratitude. She had always known that Damon was capable of change, but hearing these words from him was more than she had ever hoped for. This was her moment to make a difference, and with Damon by her side, she knew they could accomplish anything. Weeks went by, and Damon's commitment to his family became more than just a gesture. It was a daily effort. As the months passed, the bond between him and Jace grew stronger, though not without its bumps. Jace had always been reserved, unsure whether he could fully trust his father again. But Damon knew that trust had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Every small step mattered. Every moment of connection counted. One afternoon, as the two were working on the car together, a pastime they had once shared before Damon's business took over, Jace finally spoke the words Damon had been longing to hear. "You know, I think I'm starting to believe you, Dad." Damon's heart swelled with emotion, but he kept his composure. "You don't have to rush it, Jace. I'm just glad we're here, together. That's all that matters." Jace gave a small smile. "Yeah, me too. I think we can be a family again." Those simple words made everything worth it. Damon knew they weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like they were heading in the right direction. Aurora, too, had started to trust Damon more. As she focused on building her own business, Damon had become not just her partner, but a source of support in ways she hadn't expected. He helped her with the logistics, ensured she had the resources she needed, and even began attending networking events by her side. One evening, after a particularly successful pitch to a group of investors, Aurora and Damon stood on the balcony of their shared apartment, overlooking the city lights. Aurora turned to Damon, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I didn't think I'd be here. You know, building this business. I've wanted it for so long, but I never thought I'd have someone who believes in me this much." Damon looked at her, his expression soft but resolute. "You've always had it in you, Aurora. I'm just here to help you bring it to life." Aurora smiled, a weight lifting off her shoulders. "Thank you. You've been incredible." Damon reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "And I'll keep being incredible. For you, for Jace, for all of us. This isn't just about business or redemption. It's about creating something real, together." With the business venture finally gaining momentum, things started to look up for Aurora and Damon. However, their success was met with resistance from the outside. Damon's past, the one he had worked so hard to move beyond, kept creeping back in. His old rivals in the corporate world began noticing the growing influence of Aurora's startup and the bond between her and Damon. They saw it as a threat. One evening, Damon received a call that made his stomach drop. His old business partner, Trent, had been spreading rumors about him, accusing Damon of betraying the company and his principles. It wasn't long before those rumors started to spread throughout the business world, casting doubt on his ability to lead both his family and his empire. The next morning, Damon walked into the office, his mind racing with plans for damage control. Aurora was there, already working on her computer, but the moment she saw the look on his face, she knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Damon ran a hand through his hair, trying to collect his thoughts. "Trent's spreading lies about me, saying I've betrayed the company and you. I don't know how to fight this." Aurora stood up, walking over to him with determination in her eyes. "We'll fight it together." We have something they don't: our integrity. I believe in what we've built, Damon, and I believe in you. Let's make them see that. Her words hit him harder than he expected. For so long, he had been focused on proving himself to others, but now it was clear. Aurora was right. This battle wasn't just about defending his reputation. It was about proving that their success was built on something real, something that couldn't be shaken by lies or deception. In the weeks that followed, Damon and Aurora went on the offensive. They held press conferences, publicly cleared the air about the rumors, and made sure that their business and personal lives were in order. But it wasn't enough to just defend themselves. They needed to take the fight to their rivals. Damon called in favors from old friends in the industry, using his connections to expose the corruption within the companies that were trying to tear them down. He brought forward documents, testimonies, and evidence that not only cleared his name, but also revealed the depth of the betrayal his former partner, Trent, had committed. It was a dangerous game to play, but Damon had no choice. He had to protect everything he had built, for himself, for Aurora, and for Jace. Aurora was right by his side throughout the process, working tirelessly to ensure their startup stayed on track, despite the chaos swirling around them. She continued to meet with investors, pushing the business forward, even as the battle raged on behind the scenes. Damon couldn't help but admire her strength and resilience. She wasn't just a partner, she was the backbone of everything they were trying to create. But just as things were starting to look up, another bombshell dropped. Trent had taken things too far. He had leaked sensitive information about Damon's financial dealings, information that could ruin him. It wasn't just a personal attack. It was a full-scale assault on everything Damon had worked for. Aurora was the first to see it. She came rushing into the office, her face pale as she held up her phone. "Damon, you need to see this." Damon took the phone from her hand, his eyes scanning the article that had been published by one of the biggest business news outlets. It was a scandalous piece, filled with fabricated details about his past dealings. If it wasn't stopped, it would be the end of everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal battles and public relations strategies. Damon's legal team worked around the clock to refute the claims, but the damage had already been done. His reputation was tarnished, and the trust he had spent so long rebuilding was hanging by a thread. But Damon wasn't about to give up. He had lost too much to let this destroy him. He knew what needed to be done. He had to fight fire with fire. And this time, he wouldn't do it alone. He turned to Aurora. "I'm going to take everything back. We're going to use this to show everyone who we really are." Aurora's eyes locked with his. "I'm with you, Damon. Whatever it takes." With that, Damon made his move. He brought in a powerful media consultant, one who had worked with some of the biggest names in business to rebuild their public image. Together, they crafted a plan that would not only clear Damon's name, but also turn the tables on Trent and his collaborators. It was time to fight back, and Damon was ready to do whatever it took to protect his future. Damon's heart pounded as he looked over the documents his legal team had compiled. The case was spiraling out of control, but one thing had become clear. This wasn't just about defending his name anymore. This was about exposing Trent for the fraud he truly was. Aurora's steady presence beside him grounded him, giving him the strength to push forward. "Damon, I've been thinking," Aurora said as she sat down beside him, holding a glass of water. "You've been working so hard to prove yourself to the world, but this fight isn't just for you. It's for Jace too. You've shown him how to stand up for what's right." Damon turned to her, meeting her gaze. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had been focused on fighting for his redemption, but now he realized it wasn't just about his past. It was about building something for their future. For Jace, for Aurora, for the life they wanted to create together. "You're right," Damon replied, his voice steady. "I've spent too long trying to fix everything I've lost. But now, it's time to fix what's ahead of us. We can do this, Aurora, together." The weight of the situation was heavy, but for the first time in a long time, Damon felt like they had the upper hand. With Aurora's business acumen and his connections in the corporate world, they were a formidable team. The media strategy was put into action. Damon took a direct approach, releasing a video addressing the accusations. In it, he didn't just deny the rumors, he explained the years of hard work and the sacrifices he had made for the business he had built. He acknowledged his mistakes and promised to rebuild, not just for himself, but for those he loved. When the video hit social media, it was met with mixed reactions. Some still believed the accusations, but a large portion of the public was captivated by his honesty. The response was overwhelming. Damon was no longer just the powerful CEO, he was a man fighting for redemption, a man who had lost everything and was determined to regain it. As the days went by, the situation became more intense. Trent, desperate to maintain control of his empire, started taking extreme measures. He leaked more false information, trying to tarnish Damon's reputation even further. But Damon was ready. He and Aurora had anticipated every move Trent could make. One morning, Damon received a call that would change everything. His assistant informed him that Trent was planning to make a public move, a press conference scheduled for the following day, where he would reveal what he claimed was the truth about Damon's past dealings. It was clear that Trent wasn't going to back down, and now it was time for Damon to take the battle to the next level. "Aurora, we need to act fast," Damon said, his voice firm as he paced back and forth. "We can't let him control this narrative any longer." Aurora stood up from her desk, her face resolute. "We won't. I have a plan." Damon stopped pacing and looked at her. "What's the plan?" Aurora smiled. "We'll expose Trent for who he really is. He thinks he can control the narrative, but we're going to take it back. We'll use his own tactics against him." It was a bold move, but Damon trusted her. They spent the next few hours working on a counter-offensive strategy that would expose Trent's lies and reveal his corruption to the public. They dug deep, pulling in everything they had on Trent's illegal activities, everything from financial fraud to ethical violations within his company. The day of Trent's press conference arrived, and Damon knew that this was the moment that would either make or break him. He was ready. Standing at the podium in front of the cameras, Trent smirked, as if he knew victory was within his grasp. He started his speech, painting Damon as a fraud, claiming that Damon had caused irreparable damage to the company and everyone involved. His words were harsh, and the media lapped it up, feeding into the narrative Trent had crafted. But just as Trent began to gain momentum, Damon walked into the room, unannounced. The reporters fell silent, surprised to see him there. With a calm demeanor, Damon took the mic from the table and began to speak. "You've heard Trent's version of events," Damon said, his voice steady, "but now it's time for the truth." He laid out the evidence, the documents that proved Trent's involvement in shady financial dealings, the fabricated stories, and the illegal transactions that Trent had orchestrated to line his pockets. Damon didn't hold back, exposing Trent's lies in front of the world. The room was silent. Trent's face turned ashen, and for the first time, his smirk faltered. Damon had taken control of the narrative, and the public could no longer deny the truth. The aftermath of Damon's revelation was nothing short of a media storm. The news spread like wildfire, and soon Trent was the one under scrutiny. His company's stock plummeted, and investigations into his corrupt practices were launched. The public's perception of Damon shifted dramatically. No longer seen as the disgraced CEO, Damon was now viewed as a man who had fought back against a corrupt system and won. As the days passed, Damon felt a sense of vindication. But he knew that this battle wasn't just about winning, it was about rebuilding what had been lost. The next few weeks were spent working on stabilizing his business, securing the future for his family, and ensuring that their company, Aurora's business too, thrived in the aftermath. Aurora, too, had gained recognition for her role in helping Damon navigate the crisis. She had proven herself not just as a businesswoman, but as a true partner in every sense of the word. Their bond had deepened, and they both knew that the future was now theirs to shape. As the dust settled, Damon stood at the window of his office, looking out over the city. The skyline was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and for the first time in years, he felt at peace. His business was thriving again, his reputation restored, and most importantly, he had his family back. Jace was beginning to open up more, sharing his thoughts and dreams with Damon, while Aurora was becoming a trusted business partner in every way. Everything we've worked for, it's all falling into place, Damon said, his voice filled with a quiet sense of pride. Aurora joined him at the window, her hand resting on his shoulder. It's just the beginning, she said. We've got a long road ahead, but together we can do anything. Damon looked at her, a deep sense of gratitude in his heart. Together, he echoed. The story is now complete, and the lessons of redemption, trust, and perseverance have come full circle. Damon's journey has been one of personal growth, learning to fight for what's right, and rebuilding his life after losing everything. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always a path forward, if you have the courage to take it. As Damon and Aurora look toward the future, you too have the opportunity to shape your own journey. Don't let setbacks define you. Instead, learn from them, grow, and rise stronger than ever. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and the power of second chances, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Join us for more powerful stories of transformation and redemption. Thank you for watching.